The Book of Yoel and Procopius' History of the Wars. The Origin of the Moors. Exiles from the land of Canaan.
I am Canaan من إسرائيل. أنا كنعاني. أنا من إسرائيل كنعاني.
حفري ما حام شرخاح أني ميام كنانيم גרים פה.
יש אנשים 500.
500. העם פה, כנענים?
Yes, yeah.
A Canaanite boy, and he is with the donkey, and he's taking care of his sheep. A responsible young man. They're goats, and one of them's got great big horns. I hope he doesn't hit me. This is what we're called.
Moving some, Dad. Moving some. I don't have my wide angle. I can't get.
Okay. How of me? Now how am I now?
The Book of Yoel, Joel, chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. For look, in those days and at that time, when I turn back the captivity of Yahudah and Yerushalayim, then I shall gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And I shall enter into judgment with them there for my people, my inheritance, Yasharal, whom they have scattered among the nations and have divided up my land. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a young man for a whore, and sold a girl for wine, and drank it. And also, what are you to me, O Tsor and Tsidon, and all the coasts of Philistia? Are you repaying me? And if you are repaying me, I would swiftly and speedily return your reward on your own head. For you have taken my silver and my gold, and have brought my treasures into your temples. And the people of Yahudah and the people of Yerushalayim you have sold to the sons of Yawan, to remove them far from their borders. The Torah is not simply a book written by men. It contains knowledge beyond the confines of space and time. It contains the words of the living Elohim, Yahuwah. The Book of Yoel is believed to have been written sometime during the 8th century BCE. It contains a prophecy that was fulfilled around 2,000 years after it was first recorded. It concerns the people of Yahudah and Yerushalayim, the people of Tsor, Tsidon, and Philistia, and the descendants of Yawan. For those of you who are not familiar with these ancient names, and for those of you who are also not students of history, you may find it confusing and difficult to see how this information is relevant to the lives we are living today. However, if you track these names and peoples through the course of history, you will find that as they moved to new settlements and created new cities, their names also changed. These names and places are connected to peoples living today. During the course of this video, I will provide historical references proving that the people of Yahudah and Yerushalayim are the sub-Saharan Africans, specifically those of the African diaspora called Negroes and who were also transported in ships during the slave trade. I will prove that the people of Tsor, Tsidon, and Philistia are the ancestors of those called Moors, Berbers, and Tuareg, those who captured and sold the people of Yahudah and Yerushalayim to the sons of Yawan. I will also prove that the descendants of Yawan are the coastal Europeans living in the islands and peninsulas of the Mediterranean, and are among those called Greeks, Italians, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. The Book of Yeshayahu, Isaiah, chapter 46, verses 5 through 13. To whom do you liken me, and compare me, and make me similar, that we should be alike? They pour gold out of the bag and weigh silver on the scale. They hire a goldsmith, and he makes it a mighty one. They fall down, they also bow themselves. They bear it on the shoulders. They carry it and set it in its place, and it stands. From its place it does not move. Though one cries out to it, it does not answer, nor save him from his distress. Remember this, and show yourselves men. Turn it back, you transgressors. Remember the former events of old, for I am all, and there is no one else. Elohim, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from of old that which has not yet been done, saying, my counsel does stand, and all my delight I do, calling a bird of prey from the east, the man who executes my counsel from a distant land. Indeed, I have spoken it, I also bring it to pass. I have planned it, I also do it. Listen to me, you stubborn-hearted, who are far off from righteousness. I shall bring my righteousness near. It is not far off, and my deliverance, it is not delayed. And I shall give you deliverance in Zion, my esteem to Yasharal. The Canaanim, Canaanites. The book of Bereshit, Genesis, chapter 10, verses 15 through 19. And Canaan brought forth Tsidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arwadite, and the Semirite, and the Hamathite. And afterward the clans of the Canaanites were spread abroad, and the border of the Canaanites was from Tsidon as you go toward Gerar, as far as Azza, as you go toward Sidom and Amorah and Admah and Seboim, as far as Lasha. Nahum Slush, Travels in North Africa, pages 337 to 338. There is an old Hebrew tradition that at the time of the conquest of the Holy Land by the Israelites under Joshua the son of Nun, certain Canaanite tribes migrated to Africa. One Tosefta, quoting an older source, says that when Joshua approached Canaan, he told the inhabitants that 3 courses were open to them. They could either leave the country, or they could sue for peace, or they could declare war against him. The Girgashites, among others, preferred to withdraw into Africa. The Tosefta goes on to say that the Amorites, the Cadmoni, the Kenites, and the Kizanites, some of whom figure among the founders of Carthage, also went to Africa. These traditions date from a period when communication between Africa and Phoenicia was continuous. The proper names of Girgash and Kenaz are often to be met with in Carthaginian inscriptions. Joseph J. Williams, Hebrewisms of West Africa, page 187. Sir Harry Johnston is of opinion that the Phoenicians were a Semite tribe closely allied to the Hebrew stock, which originated in the vicinity of the Persian Gulf and spread across Arabia to the Syrian coast, halting traditionally for some time on the Dead Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba. Their headquarters were at Tyre and Sidon. The Greeks called them Phonikoi, the Romans called them Phoni or Punici. The Greek word means red people. Their own name seems to have been Cana or Canaan. Ancient History Encyclopedia, Carthage, by Joshua J. Mark, published on the 14th of May, 2018. According to legend, Carthage was founded by the Phoenician queen Elisa, better known as Dido, sometime around 813 BCE, although actually it rose following Alexander's destruction of Tyre in 332 BCE. The city in modern-day Tunisia, North Africa, was originally known as Kart Hadash, New City, to distinguish it from the older Phoenician city of Utica nearby. The Greeks called the city Karshadon, and the Romans turned this name into Carthago. Originally a small port on the coast, established only as a stop for Phoenician traders to resupply or repair their ships, Carthage grew to become the most powerful city in the Mediterranean before the rise of Rome. A city of trade. After the fall of the great Phoenician city of Tyre to Alexander the Great in 332 BCE, those Tyrians who were able to escape fled to Carthage with whatever wealth they had. Since many whom Alexander spared were those rich enough to buy their lives, these refugees landed in the city with considerable means and established Carthage as the new center of Phoenician trade. Alexander, 334 to 323 BC, conquest of the Persian Empire. Wari, page 48. 8,000 Tyrians were killed. Of Alexander's forces, up to 400 Macedonians are reported as having lost their lives in the siege. Of these, 20 were Hypapsis, who fell with the heroic Admetus in the final assault. In the city at the time of its capture were many Carthaginian pilgrims, who had visited their mother city according to custom to pay honor to Melicart, the Phoenician Hercules, in whose temple they now took refuge. These Alexander spared, but other foreigners, together with Tyrian survivors, were sold into slavery, about 30,000 persons in all. Procopius, History of the Wars, Books 3 to 4. Procopius, born at Caesarea in Palestine, late in the 5th century, became a lawyer. In AD 527, he was made legal advisor and secretary of Belisarius, commander against the Persians, and went with Belisarius again in 533 against the Vandals, and in 535 against the Ostrogoths. Sometime after 540, he returned to Constantinople. Doing, pages 287 to 291. And now, since the narration of the history has brought me to this point, it is necessary to tell from the beginning whence the nation of the Moors came to Libya and how they settled there. When the Hebrews had withdrawn from Egypt and had come near the boundaries of Palestine, Moses, a wise man who was their leader on the journey, died, and the leadership was passed on to Joshua, the son of Nun, who led his people into Palestine, and, by displaying a valor in war greater than that natural to a man, gained possession of the land, and after overthrowing all the nations, he easily won the cities, and he seemed to be altogether invincible. Now at that time the whole country along the sea from Tsidon as far as the boundaries of Egypt was called Phoenicia, and one king in ancient times held sway over it, as it is agreed by all who have written the earliest accounts of the Phoenicians. In that country there dwelt very populous tribes, the Girgasites and the Jebusites, and some others with other names by which they are called in the history of the Hebrews. Now when these nations saw that the invading general was an irresistible prodigy, they emigrated from their ancestral homes and made their way to Egypt, which adjoined their country. And finding there no place sufficient for them to dwell in, since there has been a great population in Egypt from ancient times, they proceeded to Libya. And they established numerous cities and took possession of the whole of Libya as far as the Pillars of Hercules. And there they have lived up to my time, using the Phoenician tongue. They also built a fortress in Numidia, where now is the city called Tigasis. In that place are 2 columns made of white stone near the great spring, having Phoenician letters cut into them, which say in the Phoenician tongue, "We are they who fled from before the face of Joshua, the robber, the son of Nun." There were also other nations settled in Libya before the Moors, who on account of having been established there from of old were said to be children of the soil. And because of this, they say that Antaeus, their king, who wrestled with Hercules in Calypia, was a son of the earth. And in later times, those who removed from Phoenicia with Dido came to the inhabitants of Libya as to kinsmen, and they willingly allowed them to found and to hold Carthage. But as time went on, Carthage became a powerful and populous city, and a battle took place between them and their neighbors, who, as has been said, had come from Palestine before them, and are called Moors at the present time. And the Carthaginians defeated them and compelled them to live a very great distance away from Carthage. Later on, the Romans gained supremacy over all of them in war, and settled the Moors at the extremity of the inhabited land of Libya, and made the Carthaginians and the other Libyans subject and tributary to themselves. And after this, the Moors won many victories over the Vandals and gained possession of the land now called Mauritania, extending from Gadara as far as to the boundaries of Caesarea, as well as the most of Libya which remained. Such then is the story of the settlement of the Moors in Libya. Mungo Park, Travels in the Interior of Africa, pages 101 to 102. Of the origin of these Moorish tribes, as distinguished from the inhabitants of Barbary, from whom they are divided by the great desert, nothing further seems to be known than what is related by John Leo the African, whose account may be abridged as follows. Before the Arabian conquest, about the middle of the 7th century, all the inhabitants of Africa, whether they were descended from the Numidians, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Romans, Vandals, or Goths, were comprehended under the general name of Morai or Moors. All these nations were converted to the religion of Muhammad during the Arabian Empire under the caliphs. About this time, many of the Numidian tribes, who led a wandering life in the desert and supported themselves upon the produce of their cattle, retired southward across the great desert to avoid the fury of the Arabians. And one of those tribes, says Leo, that of the Zanhaga, was discovered and conquered by the Negro nations on the Niger. By the Niger is here undoubtedly meant the river Senegal, which in the Mandingo language is called Bafing, or the Black River. To what extent these people are now spread over the African continent, it is difficult to ascertain. There is reason to believe that their dominion stretches from west to east in a narrow line or belt, from the mouth of the Senegal on the northern side of the river to the confines of Abyssinia. They are a subtle and treacherous race of people, and take every opportunity of cheating and plundering the credulous and unsuspecting Negroes. Park, page 131. I was sent along with the 2 tents and arrived in the evening at the Negro town called Farani. Here we pitched the tents in an open place at no great distance from the town. The hurry and the confusion which attended this decampment prevented the slaves from dressing the usual victuals, and lest their dry provisions should be exhausted before they reached their place of destination, for as yet none but Ali and the chief men knew whither we were going, they thought proper to make me observe this day as a day of fasting. As I had some reason to suspect that the succeeding day was also to be considered as a fast, I went in the morning to the Negro town of Farani and begged some provisions from the duty, who readily supplied my wants and desired me to come to his house every day during my stay in the neighborhood. These hospitable people are looked upon by the Moors as an abject race of slaves and are treated accordingly. Park, page 138. The natural barrenness of the country is such that it furnishes but few materials for manufacture. The Moors, however, contrive to weave a strong cloth with which they cover their tents. The thread is spun by their women from the hair of goats, and they prepare the hides of their cattle so as to furnish saddles, bridles, pouches, and other articles of leather. They are likewise sufficiently skillful to convert the native iron which they procure from the negroes into spears and knives, and also into pots for boiling their food. But their sabres and other weapons, as well as their firearms and ammunition, they purchase from the Europeans in exchange for the negro slaves which they obtain in their predatory excursions. Their chief commerce of this kind is with the French traders on the Senegal River. Park, pages 142 to 143. Although the wealth of the Moors consists chiefly in their numerous herds of cattle, yet as the pastoral life does not afford full employment, the majority of the people are perfectly idle, and spend the day in trifling conversation about their horses or in laying schemes of depredation on the Negro villages. Park, page 146. I have observed the Moors, in their complexion, resemble the mulattoes of the West Indies, but they have something unpleasant in their aspect which the mulattoes have not. I fancied that I discovered in the features of most of them a disposition towards cruelty and low cunning, and I would never contemplate their physiognomy without feeling sensible uneasiness. From the staring wildness of their eyes, a stranger would immediately set them down as a nation of lunatics. The treachery and malevolence of their character are manifest in their plundering excursions against the Negro villages, sometimes without the smallest provocation, and sometimes under the fairest professions of friendship. They will suddenly seize upon the Negroes' cattle, and even upon the inhabitants themselves. The Negroes very seldom retaliate. The enterprising boldness of the Moors, their knowledge of the country, and, above all, the superior fleetness of their horses, make them such formidable enemies that the petty Negro states which border upon the desert are in continual terror while the Moorish tribes are in the vicinity, and are too much awed to think of resistance. George Francis Dow, Slave Ships and Slaving, page 1. Not long after the Gulf of Guinea was discovered by Portuguese navigators, and at least 2 decades before Columbus sailed from Palos, a slave market was set up at Lisbon, at which Negroes from the Guinea coast were sold to any who would buy. It was the Moors who had told the Portuguese of the black-skinned people living in great numbers to the south of the Great Desert, a race cursed of God and predestined as slaves. Ivan van Sertima, Golden Age of the Moor, page 98. Slavery was aggravated by the rather distorted demands of capitalism. Rulers in the Sudan were often ready and willing to comply because of the money involved. Apart from this, they conceived of themselves as possessing ethnicities different from the people they sold. The 18th century saw not only the economic ascendancy of Europe, but a great devaluation of African humanity south of the Sahara. And according to a recent writer, while the Turks, Arabs, and Berbers would marry their daughters off to European slaves, marriage to a man of the Sudan, slave or free, was considered denigrating. Joseph J. Williams, Hebrewisms of West Africa, page 217. Charles de la Ronciere, custodian of documents at the National Library of Paris, quite recently published under the auspices of the Société Royale de Géographie d'Egypte, a scholarly work wherein he reproduced all the early maps of Africa that he had been able to discover. Incidentally, he quoted a Latin document apparently written at Tementet, the old capital of Tuat, in 1447 by Anthony Malafont, who speaks of the large number of Jews at Tuat and further refers to the Tuaregs as Philistia and represents them as the greatest enemies of the Jews. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The Canaanites, who are also called Moors, are of the line of Ham. In Ivan van Sertima's book, The Golden Age of the Moor, he wrote that the rulers in the Sudan conceived of themselves as possessing ethnicities different from the people they sold, and they avoided marrying off their daughters to men of the Sudan, slave or free, because they considered it denigrating. This same idea is repeated in Zondervan's Pictorial Bible Dictionary under the definition for Ham. The youngest son of Noah, born about 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Regardless of what intermixing went on between the descendants of the sons of Noah, the children of any union were considered to belong to the house and nation of their father. The male Y chromosome is passed down from father to son, with slight variations to distinguish male lines, one from the other. Because of this, it is used to track the geographic movement and settlements of people through time, and can be used to trace their origins. What both the Moors and Zondervan knew was that the so-called Negroes were not of the line of Ham. This only leaves 2 possible options. The Negroes either descend from the line of Shem or the line of Japheth. Both Zondervan and Lothrop Stoddard agree that the Negroes do not descend from the line of Japheth. Zondervan's Pictorial Bible Dictionary. Japheth, a son of Noah, he was older than Shem but comes third in some list of the 3 sons. Shem, however, is usually named first. Japheth and his wife were saved in the ark. He aided Shem in covering the naked body of their drunken father. He is the progenitor of the more remote northern peoples of southeastern Europe. That he was to occupy the tents of Shem is thought to refer to the conquest of the Greeks who were descendants of Japheth. This he did during the days of Assyrian power. He had 7 sons whose descendants occupied the isles of the Gentiles, Hellenes or Greeks, an area including Asia Minor and Upper Greece. Lothrop Stoddard, The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy, page 4. The man who, on a quiet spring evening of the year 1914, opened his atlas to a political map of the world and pored over its many tinted patterns, probably got the fundamental impression the white man towered the indisputable master of the planet. Forth from Europe's teeming mother hive, the imperious sons of Japheth had sworn for centuries to plant their laws, their customs, and their battle flags at the uttermost ends of the earth. 2 whole continents, North America and Australia, had been made virtually as white in blood as the European motherland. 2 other continents, South America and Africa, had been extensively colonized by white stocks, while even huge Asia had seen its empty northern march, Siberia pre-emptied for the white man's abode. Even where white populations had not locked themselves to the soil, few regions of the earth had escaped the white man's imperial sway, and areas inhabited by uncounted myriads of dusky folk obeyed the white man's will. Once you have eliminated all other possibilities, that which remains is the truth. In this case, we have eliminated the possibilities of Ham and Japhet. Therefore, the so-called Negroes, those captured and sold by the Moors to the Europeans, must be descendants of Shem. Now let us take a closer look at the descendants of Yawan. The book of Bereshit, Genesis chapter 10 verses 1 through 5. And this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japhet. And sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japhet, Gomer and Magog and Madai, and Yawan and Tubal and Meshech and Tyrus. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz and Riphath and Togarmah. And the sons of Yawan, Elisha and Tarshish, Kittim and Dodanim. From these the coastland peoples of the nations were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their clans, into their nations. The book of Jasher, chapter 10, verse 13. The children of Javan are the Javanim, who dwell in the land of Macedonia. The book of Jasher, chapter 10, verses 15 to 17. And the children of Elisha are the Almanium, and they also went and built themselves cities. Those are the cities situated between the mountains of Job and Shabbathmo, and of them were the people of Lombardy, who dwell opposite the mountains of Job and Shabbathmo. And they conquered the land of Italia, and remain there to this day. The children of Chittim are the Romim, who dwell in the valley of Canopia, by the river Tibru. The children of Dudanim are those who dwell in the cities of the sea Gihon, in the land of Borna. Both the Greeks and Italians are descendants of Yawan. Their colonies covered the coastlines of the Mediterranean Sea. The book of Jasher, chapter 61, verses 24 to 25. And the children of Chittim saw the bravery of Zepho, and the children of Chittim resolved and made Zepho king over them. He became king over them, and while he reigned they went to subdue the children of Tubal and all the surrounding islands. Their king Zepho led them, and they made war with Tubal and the islands, and they subdued them. When they returned from the battle, they renewed his government for him, and built for him a very large palace for his royal habitation and seat. And they made a large throne for him. Zepho reigned over the whole land of Chittim and over the land of Italia 50 years. The New Complete Works of Josephus, Whiston, page 57. For Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now call Galatians, Gauls, but were then called Gomerites. Magog founded those that from him were named Magogites, but who are by the Greeks called Scythians. Now as to Javan and Madai came the Medians, who are called Medes by the Greeks, but from Javan, Ionia, and all the Grecians are derived. The New Complete Works of Josephus, Whiston, pages 57 to 58. Of the three sons of Javan, also the son of Japhet, Elisha, gave name to the Elysians, who were his subjects. They are now the Aeolians. Tharsus, Tarshish, to the Tharsians, for so was Cilicia of old called. The sign of which is this, that the noblest city they have, and a metropolis also, is Tarsus, the ta being by change put for the theta. Scythimus, Kittim, possessed the island Scythima. It is now called Cyprus, and from that it is that all islands and the greatest part of the sea coast are called Scythim by the Hebrews. And one city therein, Cyprus, that has been able to preserve its denomination, it has been called Citius by those who use the language of the Greeks, and has not, by the use of that dialect, escaped the name Scythim. There have been many Greeks living in Sicily and Italy since ancient times. The Greeks and Italians are closely related, both being descendants of Japheth's son, Yawan. Now it should start to make sense of why Shaul was speaking Greek to the Roman commander who mistook him for a Mitzrayim. In closing, if we take a close look at the books of Bereshit, Devarim, Yoel, and Zephaniah, it tells the story of how the exiles of Yasharal would be found living beyond the rivers of Kush, captured by the people of Tsor, Tsidon, and Philistia, and sold into slavery to the children of Yawan, being transported in ships to the slave markets where they would be sold, living in a foreign land and being afflicted by them for 400 years. There is no other people on the face of this earth whose history fits these prophecies other than the so-called Negroes of the African diaspora.